Hello, everybody, and welcome to your BC Real Estate Guide for everyday buyers, sellers, and investors. I am your host, Garry Voigt, alongside CJ Christensen and Donna today.
Hi.
Hey. And today we're going to be talking about a very popular topic, and that is Airbnb properties and Airbnb investments. This gets brought up a lot to us from our clients as they want to expand their portfolio and add an Airbnb property or an Airbnb condo to that investment portfolio. And there's a lot of misconceptions with Airbnb, and there's a lot of information to know about purchasing an Airbnb property, the pros and the cons, what you need to look out for, and what you can prepare for when purchasing one of those properties. We are going to be going over a couple of those points today, and hopefully this helps you make an informed decision when purchasing an Airbnb investment property, and if it is the best investment choice for you. So first things first, we're going to talk about is what types of places and what buildings allow Airbnbs. Now, it's confusing for some people because the legislation just changed that there are no rental restrictions allowed anymore in any strata properties given 55 plus. Sorry, 55 plus still allows rentals, but they have to be the age of 55 plus or older. So we got a lot of calls right away with people wondering if that affected Airbnb as well. But the reality of it is majority of these stratas have bylaws that restrict short-term rental. So this new legislation actually didn't change that short-term rental bylaw. It is still the bylaw in a majority of strata. So the first thing that we do when somebody approaches us and asks us that for information in regards to buying an Airbnb is asking them what location. Now, we have sold a number of Airbnb properties in downtown Vancouver and Vancouver itself because Vancouver is a hub spot. I think it's one of the second best places to live in the world behind Australia, which is pretty cool. So it's a destination that people travel to, and they use hotels and they use, Airbnbs to stay. So that's why a majority of people do choose hub cities like Vancouver for their Airbnbs, and less likely to choose a city like, Merritt or something.
And it's not
like
just
that.
that it's a beautiful city. There's just so much going on here. Rugby Sevens, Grey Cup, Invictus Games is coming, the FIFA World Cup.
FIFA World Cup.
All of those things. So it makes it not just a holiday destination, but a destination for really, really big events.
Yeah, and it's lively nightlife, great restaurants, and just an overall very cool place to hang out. So somebody approaches us and they say they want to buy an Airbnb investment property in Vancouver. So the first thing that they're generally surprised about is you are allowed to Airbnb certain properties in Vancouver if the strata bylaws allow it. However, there is a caveat. You do have to have a business license with the city of Vancouver, and it does have to be your principal residence. So that is a big misconception that people have, is that they can purchase it as an investment property and get their business license and Airbnb it out. It is difficult to justify Airbnb-ing out a property that is in a company name, because if it's your personal residence, then it usually is not in a company name. So that is the first tip. Keep in mind, it is going to have to be yours or somebody's principal residence to allow you enable to get a business license in order to Airbnb out that property. So we've had clients before purchase it in company names, and they had to jump through a couple hoops in order to get that business license to Airbnb it out. So keep in mind, one of the caveats is it has to be your principal residence. Now, there may be some ways around that, but if you're going by the book, you will have to have that property as your principal residence. So keep in mind, if you have your house that you own already, that's in your name and that's your principal residence, then you're going to have to move technically.
Be creative.
Be creative to this Airbnb and state that you are using it for your principal residence and not for Airbnb specifically, because the city of Vancouver makes it pretty clear they want to add more rental options for people in the city, and they want to basically
make it easier for people to rent.
They want to make it easy for people, that they want to promote that when you're not using your place to let other people use it. So that's the whole point of the Airbnb.
So let's talk about that for a second, because you said it's got to be the primary residence. So let's say I own like a 6-bedroom house in Vancouver. Me and my family occupy 3 or 4 of the bedrooms. Like you said, the city wants to promote that we could rent out those extra 2 bedrooms on Airbnb, because Airbnb also rents out just a solo room, not just a solo.
Totally. And that's a good point. So that's exactly what they're promoting, is that's what they want people to do. So that is one option, an easy option if you want to Airbnb. But basically, keep in mind, it should be your principal residence, or it has to be your principal residence if you're looking at purchasing an Airbnb property. So
totally
make sure you're ready to have mail sent there, all your stuff sent there, and full disclosure, it has to be your principal residence. So do whatever you like with that, but that's what it has to be. And then the second thing you're going to want to look at, okay, so you're planning to purchase this property for Airbnb purposes. Second thing you're going to want to look at is, if it's a condo, the condo bylaws.
Yeah, very, very important to look at the bylaws.
That is extremely important, and there are a couple risks associated with that, because we all know that stratas can change bylaws by way of a special general meeting or annual general meeting. So, and we always tell our clients, the risk is that if you buy this Airbnb property today and the strata allows short-term rentals, well, by the time you take possession in 3-4 months, or by the time they have their next AGM, that could be a voting.
They could change.
That could change.
So is it possible you could be grandfathered in, like you said, if you buy and then they change the rules and you're
not likely? But I mean, hey, never say never. Every strata is different, but I would not bank on that. No, so that's really important, that yes, if your intention is to buy it for Airbnb purposes, look at the bylaws, and always keep in mind that they could change those bylaws at any time. So there is a slight risk associated with purchasing a property for Airbnb sole purpose. So keep in mind, the back of your head, always think long term. So worst case scenario. What's the worst case scenario?
You can't.
They change the bylaws.
One of the things to do is look at the last 2 years AGM and see whether that has ever been something that has been voted on in the last couple of years. If it has, so like 2021 and 2022, but it was voted down, then that there is something going on, and possibly they do want to change that. So
that's a great point, and that's where we really help out with our clients, because we're analyzing these strata documents. We know what to look for. We know what to instruct our clients to look for. And Donna made a great point. If they've spoken about removing these Airbnb restrictions or re-adding them at previous AGMs, then we know it's already a topic of discussion at that building, and that building might not be the best option for you. Now, there are some heavy investor buildings in downtown Vancouver that we know of that we're not going to disclose that little golden nugget here on this podcast. But if you're interested in it, let us know. These buildings are the best buildings to buy in, because they are heavily Airbnb ownered buildings. And the likelihood of them voting on restricting Airbnbs is way less than a lot of other buildings.
And that's because all the owners of that building are making cash flow off the Airbnb. So why would they vote to change those rules when the majority of the owners are making
exactly? And in this specific circumstance, majority of owners that bought this pre-sale were investor-heavy buyers, and they hold a lot of the proxies on strata, which makes it less likely that it is going to get voted down. Now, let's talk about an Airbnb for like a house in a different municipality. Let's say, for example, Langley. We're in Langley right now, and you want to Airbnb a property out here. People love Langley. Yeah. People love Fort Langley. It's a gorgeous place. We got airports nearby. We're only an hour away from Vancouver, 45 minutes depending on traffic. So we have clients that ask us about, find us the cheapest Airbnb or something like that. So we're looking in Chilliwack, Abbotsford, Langley. And the reality of it is, there is very little places in the Fraser Valley, strata-wise, that allow Airbnb.
Yeah. So I think the best thing about a big detached home is that multiple groups. So for example, like a few couples or multiple families could stay and then they could split the bills versus if, 2 or 3 or 4 families went away and they all got hotel rooms, the bill would be way more expensive than, like you said, that house in Abbotsford, Langley, Chilliwack, somewhere in the valley.
Yeah. So two different things here. So detached principal residence is different than a strata property. So what I'm finding in the Fraser Valley is that the strata corporations, majority of them have bylaws restricting short-term rental. So it's pretty much out of the question. There are the select few, the boutique buildings, and a few buildings that do allow it. I'd say there's more in Vancouver than the Fraser Valley. Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing is if you own your principal residence, a detached home, you're allowed to Airbnb it. And for example, the township of Langley, they don't regulate it. You don't even need a business license. So as of now, they only work on a complaint basis. And I know each municipality is different because a place like Agassiz, they're not as lenient on Airbnbs for your principal residence, a detached property. But a place like Langley might be a great opportunity to purchase, a detached home. And then that perhaps has a suite in it, mm-hmm. or, CJ and I were talking if it's got a duplex style or it's got an upstairs and you want to Airbnb your suite downstairs, that could be a fantastic option. Now, what are the benefits to Airbnb-ing your either principal residence or purchasing an Airbnb investment?
So I think there's a lot of flexibility, for example, on a weekend or, during peak season in the summertime, or if, like we're talking about the FIFA World Cup or the Rugby Sevens, if a larger event is coming to town, Airbnb gives you that flexibility to bump up your rates. Whereas if you have a long-term tenant, BC, we have a lot of rules and laws protecting those tenants.
Tons of red tape when you have a long-term tenant in BC. Of course, we have to abide by the Residential Tenancy Act, and that is quite in favor of tenants.
Totally.
In BC. So if you're an owner and you go the Airbnb route, well, you have the power of who's coming, when. You're not going to have a problem getting them out because there's a set time frame for their visit.
So if you had a family member coming from out of town, you could easily book off, that week or that month that they're coming to see you or visit or come for business or whatever. You can book that time off, and then no tenants, no hassle, no worry, because it's your unit, you own it, you have all the flexibility.
Exactly. So if you're looking to purchase an Airbnb property in Vancouver, or should I say the Lower Mainland, reach out to us and we'll be able to instruct which buildings allow and which municipalities have bylaws and which ones do not, because that's the very first step of looking into it. And then, of course, the next step is, let's say you've successfully purchased an Airbnb property. Everybody's excited. So let's talk about the numbers a little bit here. Don't forget that when you purchase an Airbnb property, every time somebody rotates through, the place has to be professionally clean.
Totally.
Yeah.
So there is a big management aspect to having an Airbnb property as well, and you have to take that into consideration when you're doing your pro forma. You have to have a cleaning fee in there every time, and who's going to do the cleaning? I know for past clients of ours that have purchased in downtown Vancouver, they've hired a Airbnb management company to run their Airbnb, which if you're a busy person or if you're working full time might be the best bet. But keep in mind when doing your pro forma, they charge anywhere from 15 to 20% on the gross rents that come in. Mm. That's a pretty big chunk.
Yeah,
it is, but it gives you peace of mind. Like you said, if you are busy, it might be worth the cost just to know that you don't have to do it yourself.
Less headache, and especially if you're managing multiple units, you'd be doing a lot of running around town, leaving out, welcome gifts or to-do lists or, top 10 things to see in Vancouver to all the new, tenants coming to stay, all the new renters.
Yeah, which we found is super helpful. Well, for one, those welcome lists, it's usually a book already, a binder already there, so you just leave it out for every person. It's got the Wi-Fi and everything included. But there's a lot of ins and outs of setting up the locks. You're allowed to have a camera on the entryway to see who's coming in. That's the only spot you're allowed to have a camera. And just getting it all set up on all the platforms, VRBO, Airbnb. There's a couple other ones as well.
Yeah.
And these management companies take care of all the kind of grunt work for you, getting it all set up. So they do they are extremely helpful. And if you are a busy individual, certainly recommended, because there is a lot to set up when doing an Airbnb. And there's a lot of supplies that you have to have in the places as well. And they walk you right through that. And they basically set you up on a portal. You can see all the bookings that come in, when the unit's booked, how much is getting booked for, and it's extremely helpful in that sense. But a lot of people, they want to make the most cash flow possible, and that would be managing it yourself, right? But make sure that you allocate your time in order to manage all of it, in order to set up the cleaners, in order to go to any of those late night emergencies. Because let me tell you, there are late night emergencies that these property managers go to.
You can't vet your tenants. That's probably one of the biggest downsides, I think, to the short-term rental. You can't vet your tenants. You have absolutely no idea who's going in. So
yeah,
you got to be prepared for anything.
Yeah, and they do help out with that as well. They look at ratings, and they do help vet who is coming in and how many people in the party is coming in. And hey, if there's a emergency at 1 a.m. and you live in Langley and it's in Vancouver and you're an hour drive away, it's worth its weight in gold to have that property manager who lives close by that's able to take care of that problem, and you don't even have to wake up.
Totally.
So that is something to heavily consider when thinking about purchasing your Airbnb property. And another thing is the cost. So, we talked about the management cost, but how much is that Airbnb going to bring in?
So I looked up, it averages in Vancouver, there are over 6,000 Airbnb properties, and they're averaging about $150 per night, and they average about 115 nights a year being rented. And that's on average.
So I think that's really low. And it really depends, if it's a 3-bedroom penthouse, or if it's a townhouse, or if it's a 1-bed and den condo. We've actually had a couple clients purchase many different kinds of units. And we do find the 1-bedroom and dens do perform a little bit better than the 2-bed, 2-baths, which is interesting because, people travel in couples, right?
Totally. 2
people usually, or, I feel like not as frequently as whole families.
Yeah, and that's 6,000 properties. That's all the private rooms, shared rooms, and entire private properties. So I'm sure that there are some listings, like you said, that it's a shared room, people travel in couples. It's not getting booked one single night of the year, so that does factor in.
Yeah, so there's some months where, I would say the spring, summer, fall months are a little bit busier than the winter months. Yeah. So, and it really depends on what interest rate there is right now, because we had clients purchase when the rates were lower, and with any investment property, when you purchase it and the rates are lower, you may very well be cash flowing at that time. But keep in mind, if the rates go up, your cash flow is going to go down substantially. So it really is dependent on market conditions, whether or not, what's the rate at, what's going to be your monthly payment, and how much is the vacancy rate, and how much can you anticipate to bring in per month. From our experience and a lot of our clients' experiences, it can be certainly way higher cash flow than renting it long term. But there are those months where you might be in deficit in the slower months, but the busier months make up for it. So you make sure you have to have a little kitty aside for those slower months.
Yeah, or like you said, if there's an issue at 1 a.m. and the plumbing breaks, you might have a
there's you could be responsible for the maintenance of the unit. Stuff does break and needs to be regularly maintained. So make sure you have a kitty fund for that. And at the end of the day, for some places, it's not a license to print money. You might perform 30-40% than renting it out long term. Sometimes you do 100%, 200% higher than renting it out long term. And you don't have to deal with that long term tenant as well. So there are a number of pros for a Airbnb condo. Each one is different. Each building's different depending on location. And there are a few cons, but I think the biggest takeaway is make sure that it's your principal residence, because you have to in Vancouver, and you have to have a business license. Consider having a property manager, and consider market conditions too. Consider interest rates. Does it make sense now? With what we say for investments, you always buy long term. So if rates are high now and they anticipate to go down, well, wait it out. We don't tell anybody to buy anything for short term. It's always long term, because as that time goes on, not only are you cash flowing on the place, but you're getting that appreciation.
You're growing in equity.
You're growing equity, which is really important too. So Airbnbs can be a super lucrative type of property to buy, but make sure that you investigate the municipalities, make sure that you investigate the pro formas, got to investigate the market conditions, your mortgages and whatnot. And you have to talk to a mortgage specialist to make sure that you're able to get approved and do what you want to do. I think last thing that we'll talk about is insurance with Airbnb properties.
I think that's huge.
Because, because of the quick turnaround in the amount of people coming into the units, not all insurance companies insure properties that are being used for Airbnb purposes because they're more prone to have accidents.
And like Donna said, you can't vet who's coming into the units.
Can't vet who's coming in. So there are, I believe, 2 insurers that we're aware of that do insure Airbnb properties. But again, you have to account for that in your pro forma because usually that insurance is more expensive than just having basic home insurance. So that's another thing to take into account with your pro forma, and along with the property manager can help you put together that pro forma.
And strata fees as well. You have to remember if you are buying into a strata property, you're going to have the strata fees on top. So property taxes, all of that kind of stuff. So
yep, that's everything that you would use to put your pro forma together. Management fees, property tax, strata fees, insurance costs. Don't forget you got to pay property transfer tax when you purchase. So it's really important to put together an accurate pro forma, and a lot of the times it costs you anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 to even get it set up for Airbnbs.
Have to have furniture and nice pictures.
You got to buy. You got to get furniture. You got to have all the photos done. Again, the property manager can help out with that, but people forget. Hey, you got to furnish this whole place.
God forbid you'd wake up somewhere and they don't have a coffee machine or no mugs to drink out of.
Exactly. So you got to get it set up to the hotel standards. So a lot to consider when considering starting your Airbnb investment property. But at the end of the day, it can be very lucrative. If you have any questions, of course, reach out to us. We've sold many of them, and they have been lucrative for our clients. Did you guys have anything else to touch on before we end this one?
I think we hit it all, yeah.
So again, we're just brushing on the surface of all the ins and outs of Airbnbs. If you do decide it's something you want to move forward with, of course, reach out to us and we can get you started with the process and with all the ins and outs of it. In the meantime, hopefully this was helpful, and we'll see you on the next episode.